going to do a brief introductions here. We've got Amber Simonetti, a registered nurse, chest and pain stroke coordinator at Matsu Regional Medical Center in Palmer. Matsu is a Joint Commission certified primary stroke center. Kevin Murrick, also with us, Director of Trauma and Stroke at Alaska Regional Hospital Comprehensive Stroke Center. Kevin is also original member of the Hawaii Stroke Coalition before moving to Alaska in 2023. A prior firefighter, medic and flight nurse with 2,500 rotor hours. Over 34 years of nursing experience with the past 15 in leadership, including ED, ICU, RT, and hospital operations. And I love this. Kevin is passionate about doing one's best for anything worth doing. I love that quote, and I think that's how everybody on this panel feels. It's an amazing group.
I can show you the trademark for it.
We also have Kelly Isaacs. She's a nurse manager in the Heart and Vascular Center at Providence, Alaska Medical Center. Kelly is a lifelong Alaskan, an RN for 14 years here at Anchorage Bowl, and mother of one precocious toddler who happened to give her a little bit of laryngitis today. So hopefully she'll be able to make it through the presentation nevertheless. So thank you. And then we also have Cindy Crow. Cindy leads the patient and safety healthcare quality at Stroke. She's also stroke and bariatric coordinator at Alaska Native Medical Center. And the Alaska Native is on their journey to become a primary stroke center. So thank you all.
All right, hi everybody. Thank you, Carolina, for that introduction. For our presentation, we're going to talk about the nursing perspective and the impact of the Alaska Stroke Coalition and the Rapid Alaska Initiative. First, we're going to introduce ourselves a little bit more. And so I'm going to have Kevin go first for that one.
And first of all, I really want to thank everybody for showing up. I mean, we were hoping it was going to be 40 and rainy outside on a Friday night to get people here. Instead, it was beautiful and sunny. So thank you guys for taking time out of your day and making the sacrifice to come here and be a part of us. As Dr. He said earlier, thank you for being on those 6 a.m. calls. I don't want to say it was Dr. He that set the time, but I can tell you the group up here, the nursing panel, we were pushing for the 6 o'clock time. And as we said earlier, you can see our 4 hospitals represented here. And I think the biggest thing to me for the coalition is I would challenge you, without a coalition, where would you see the 4 people at 4 independent hospitals together on a panel talking about the same thing and supporting each other? And that's what I like about the coalition.
All right, I didn't know I had to introduce myself again a second time. So hi, everybody. I know half of you. I'm Kelly. As they said, we've met probably half of us virtually at 6 a.m. every other month. And it has been, I will say, one of the most inspiring journeys of my nursing career to be involved in this project and to have so many people from across the state stand up and say, this is a problem that has a solution, and we're Alaskans and we can do this for each other. And so I just want to thank everybody who showed up today, everyone who shows up at 6 a.m. every other month, everybody who emails and answers my emails and comes back and forth on the phone with me or Kevin or Cindy or Amber, so that we can make better systems of care across the state of Alaska for our friends and family and neighbors. So thank you. This has been a real inspirational journey for me.
I'm newer to the stroke coordinator group, so I'm kind of the baby of the group. But, I have a lot to learn from our thrombectomy capable hospitals. And as Alaska Native is on our journey to be a primary stroke center, I think I'm really proud of, being with this group and also being inspired again by Dr. Leahy and, how we can make the stroke care better in the state of Alaska overall.
And most of you know me. I'm Amber Simonetti. I work at Matsu Regional. I've been the chest pain and stroke coordinator there for about 6 years. And so it is really exciting to see how the Alaska Stroke Coalition has come to fruition. And so I'd like to start quickly with a little bit of our story summary. And so I was at those first meetings that were put together with Diane Latta and Dr. Latta. Dr. Trimble was there, Dr. He was there, and we were trying to create a South Central Stroke Committee that kind of mirrored what we've done within the STEMI world. And with COVID, it just didn't really come to fruition. And so it was really exciting when Kevin came on board and built the business side of the Alaska Stroke Coalition, which, to be very honest, I had no understanding as to why we needed a business to do the things to roll our sleeves up and fix stroke care across the state, until I realized that actually making it formal allowed us to receive grant funding and put our money where our mouth is and do stuff across the state instead of just talking about it and having each individual coordinator or physician do the things. And so I'll let Kevin talk a little bit more about the rest of the timeline there without going into too much detail.
No, thank you. We're a coalition for everyone in this room. Everyone that wants to attend the meeting is a member. But we're also a business. We're a nonprofit, and none of us and none of the physician advisors receive a dime for doing it, and we don't want to. But you have to set it on a business platform. You're not going to get generous donors and attract what you need to attract to support this without a business plan and a business license. I think Dr. He had said earlier, I moved up from Hawaii in January of 2023. If you've ever got on an airplane in Hawaii in January of 2023, you're probably in a t-shirt and shorts and slippers. You do not step off of an airplane in Anchorage in January of 2023 in a t-shirt, shorts, and slippers. Let's just say I'm a slow learner, but I learned quickly. Dr. He was a part of my interview when I applied to be the stroke coordinator at Alaska Regional. And I remember her one question she asked me was, how quick can you stand up a coalition like you were a part of in Hawaii? So I knew the reputation that Dr. He has, and I knew I couldn't disappoint her. Number one, I need her, I value her, and she's my medical director. So there was a little bit of pressure on. So I had already secured, I'd worked with the Attorney General for the state of Alaska, is where you file your business license. I'd filed for that, started the work because we have to be a nonprofit. And I mirrored off a lot of what I learned in Hawaii. This was not luck. This was not fate. This was just not redoing the stuff that didn't work before. And it was still pinging my friends back in Hawaii on, hey, that meeting, what did we do? How did we do it? And what are you going to tell me not to ever try to do because it's not going to work? So we do have our business license. We have filed our biannual report. We are good now through 2025. We have our state 501c3 status, and we also have a federal IRS 503 status. Let me tell you, when you get the letter in the mail from the IRS, you just don't know if you want to open it or not, but it was great news this time. So what we did then after that was, it's like, okay, we've got a coalition, but we got nobody in it. What do we do? Partnering with Kelly and Amber and Cindy, bringing in Dr. Latta's expertise, Dr. He as our advisors. We then okay, we've got a group now, what do we do? And so we, went out and reached out to the stroke coordinators and the stroke programs in the hospitals across the state. We did set up the early morning meetings. We've transitioned everything over from our first meeting in April of 2023 was when we officially met and founded. We had our kickoff meeting in May of 2023. We were so fortunate, and thank you again, we were so fortunate again in July of 2023 to get this gift. We had this gift, and we already had the vision to partner with RapidAI for stroke technology. I personally believe, and I saw it happen in Hawaii, you need to stick with one stroke AI technology company, and you need to roll it out across the state. And when you partner with one company, you have your neurointerventionalist with one app, one program, and it makes it a lot more seamless. So that's what we did. The hardest thing that I think we've had to do since we formed the coalition was not to decide what hospitals to offer this gift to. but it was trying to justify the hospitals that we didn't offer rapid to from the go. And that's why we looked at geographical locations, we looked at population, we looked at just, kind of that hub type philosophy. Our dream is still to get rapid out to every hospital in the state of Alaska, to every place that has a CAT scanner. That is our dream, is to get this technology out there. We're not there yet. We're working on it. We're partnering with Department of Health on a grant right now, hopeful to get some additional funds. We're still working it as much as we can, trying to figure out how can we do that. Talking with the team from Rapid during this time, it was great because I didn't tell them this, and this is probably the first time that they've heard this, but I had the original contract from 2017 in Hawaii, so I knew what we paid in Hawaii. They came through like rock stars, and I don't want to tell Hawaii now what our rate is, because they came through. And I think they see also what it takes when you partner with one company and you roll it out. And I think too, just as isolated as we are, as rural as we are, and as large as we are, having that one connection between our neurointerventionalists is, rural facilities across the state, and one platform that makes Dr. Sokolowski and Dr. He's, life hopefully easier. Probably wakes them up a little bit more at night, but hopefully makes it a little easier for them. And then we also know that our work means nothing without data. So we did put a stipulation on, and the only stipulation that we put on with the sites that were receiving Rapid as a part of the coalition's grant was that we've got to get data from you. So we then decided to partner with the American Heart Association for Get With The Guidelines, the Rural Accelerator Program. I know it's a lot of work for the sites out there. It's not an easy website to navigate. I think my partner at Alaska Regional, Mike Davis, can absolutely say Get With The Guidelines program is difficult, but he and I are tag teaming it there, and we're making it work. But we'll get data, because as of last year, Alaska looks like the healthiest state in the nation. And it only looks like the healthiest state because we're not getting the data in. We're getting data in from 3 or 4 hospitals. So therefore, when you look at the number, at the population here and the limited data that's in, then it quantifies out as, hey, we're super healthy and we don't have any strokes. And we know that's not true. So we're getting that. I will say this, a lesson learned is when you offer rapid technology out to the hospitals, you have to put a deadline on it. If you don't put a deadline to accept it, it took us 6 years in Hawaii from the first time we offered it to the last hospital that went live. We stood it up in 3 months. We gave them a 3 month, 3 months, make up your mind. It's okay if you don't want it. It's okay if it doesn't work. But we've got it, we've got this gift, and we're not going to waste this gift. Every hospital had accepted it within the 90-day period. All 6 hospitals accepted it. I think by February of this year, 5 of the 6 sites were live. And then by June of this year, all 6 sites were live. They were technically live, they were operationally live, and they were sending data and sending images. So we did this in record time, and it's not anything I did. It's what the team here did, and it's what everybody out there did, just helping us get it out. So thank you, guys.
The Alaska Stroke Coalition has been huge for all of the hospitals involved, but for myself especially, because I just sort of came in and we started this. It was like, here's your stroke program, and by the way, you're starting a nonprofit too. I was like, okay. But I have met so many people who are so passionate about that. I have made we have made partnerships with EMS, with Flight, with the Anchorage Fire Department, with all of the hospitals. Like, we're working towards a goal that is completely agnostic to what hospital system you're participating in. We're just doing it because it is the right thing to do. And we're sharing all of the information that we know, things that I've learned at Providence. Amber is able to use at Matsu, things that Kevin is doing at Regional, we are able to adapt to our workflows. And that's just been it's been such an incredible experience. So we're decreasing silos within our own hospitals, between our hospitals, between different places in the state, between different organizations, between like just all of these places. Like, you know, I met Guardian, we've met Life, and it's been an incredible thing. And I've wandered off script and I'm squeaky. I think that's everything. This has been an incredible experience. We've worked, as I said, we're 5 people with day jobs, and we've done some pretty incredible things in a really short amount of time. And I am looking forward to partnering with everyone who took the time to come and have dinner with us tonight so that we can continue to move this project forward. Squeak.
I don't know whose computer this is, but it did say it was low on battery. So if somebody could help us out with that potentially. I'm going to give you guys the perspective from a referring facility. And so at Matsu, where I work, we do not have neurosurgery or neurointervention. And so we're gonna kind of walk through a little bit of what that has meant for us, knowing that our receiving facilities are Providence and Alaska Regional. And so the first part is our team has discussed is data collection, interpretation, and reporting. Data drives change. And so if you're trying to do a big project and you have no data, you can have a lot of anecdotal stories and nothing actually solid saying where you were, where you are, and where you're trying to go. As the person who did the data collection at my hospital primarily for 5 out of the last 6 years, it is tedious work, but it's worthwhile when you can actually take it and make it speak. For those of you who are involved in data within stroke or who have ever looked at a feedback form, there are a plethora of door-to goals, right? Your door to alert, your door to doc, door to CT start, door to CT interpretation. When was your treatment decision? When did you give medications? When did the patient leave? When did they get to the receiving hospital? There's a lot of things that go into it. And all of those little process pieces drive your performance, right? What was your door to needle? What was your door in, door out time? What was your time to puncture? And what was the outcome for that patient? Because time is brain. The only way to do all of that is by establishing processes and then refining those processes. And so I have 2 case studies that I'm going to go through quickly, just to kind of show some of the growth that we've done at our own facility, which has been fed by the work that we've done on this coalition. And so learning things from each of my counterparts here and people all across the state, and bringing that back to my facility to see how can we keep doing better for our community, because we want them to go home with less disability, because we know that our post-stroke resources are limited. And so this was a case from January. This was a 39-year-old female who came in via EMS. She did have a large vessel occlusion. She was out of the window for lytics. And 39's young, right? Strokes are happening younger and younger. This is her whole life ahead of her, basically. And so our EMS has done a great job of implementing van screening. We've been doing a lot of work in our ER of making sure that our team knows what that means and what they need to do. At this point in time, we would still room patients and then we would take them to CT. So anybody in the stroke world knows that no delay CT or direct to CT is a much better way to go. Even so, within this, our door in, door out time was 109 minutes, I think. Yeah, 109 minutes. And so we were over the 90-minute goal, but under the 120-minute goal, so kind of in the middle there. Her NIH got a lot worse while she was in transport. They were able to pull out a big clot, and she ultimately discharged home 5 days later with an NIH of 1. And so time's tissue, and so I don't know if we had saved another 20 minutes, would that have made a difference of a NIH of 1 to 0? I'm not sure. Ultimately, she's doing very well today. One of the things we continue to work on at our facility is trying to streamline our call times. And so like Dr. He was talking about, not waiting for radiology to call back that, yes, we're confirming an LVO, and then first calling the doctor and then ultimately calling LifeMed, but to do more of those processes in parallel. And that's something that we continue to work on. And this case is from July, which I am happy to say that we have updated our processes to a no delay CT approach. So our door to CT time improved for this particular case. This patient, a huge shout out to our local police. They were pulled over as a potential drunk driver. The police officer recognized stroke symptoms. EMS was activated. They came to our hospital. Yeah, it's a big deal, right? Based off of the timeline, the calls, et cetera, the patient was deemed eligible for lytics. They ultimately also had an LVO and were shipped out for thrombectomy. And his discharging NIH was 4. He went to rehab and has made a much more significant recovery. And so importance of your community education, education of all of our first responders, and then the teams in trying to make everything happen. And so those are just a little bit of feedback from things that we've been working on at my hospital. And I like to talk about them because when I started my journey as a stroke coordinator, it was kind of a blank slate without a whole lot of guidance. And I think that it's really important for every program to have other folks to reach out to say, how did you make this work? How do you meet all these different metrics? What are you working on? What are your challenges and things like that? Both for our huge comprehensive centers and then also for all of our rural centers as well. And I'm going to turn it over to Cindy to share one of her cases.
So I'm not going to go into the details of the case. What I'm going to highlight here is really it's a success story and how our team has gone from 0 to 60 in a short period of time. For Native Hospital, we're starting from the very beginning and from scratch. And we've made a ton of work in the last year and a half. And I think it's really the people behind all the bells and whistles and all the things. And tip of the hat to the ED providers we have here in the house from AMC is that it's a team sport. And so you can have all the devices and all the cool things, but what's behind it is the people. And so the success story we have here is just showing that, it's working. So we've achieved our goals in our time windows, which is fantastic. Very proud of those. But that's only half the story on our part. You see that we have the AMC section, but we really like to highlight again what Amber has said is that, we're partners. And so for our team to see what actually happened with the patient, Alaska Regional reaches back out to us and gives us the other half of the story. And so we sent our patient out and we think we did everything right. Well, what happened? Did it still go well? And so we got to see that great outcome that the patient did do really well. And then it's really motivating to our teams. And so you can see that we have the people behind it and how excited we are that we're getting things done. And like I said, having the product and realizing that the product works. It's the product, it's the people, it's the attitude, and it's the wanting to do it and wanting to be there and for all the right reasons and for our patient population.
So I probably failed to tell you this, but when my CEO, Jennifer, who's in attendance tonight, when she hired me and got my start date, she says, oh, by the way, we're going to change our processes at Alaska Regional. Okay. I mean, we still have lytics. We still do thrombectomy. What are we going to change? She says, you're going to do a launch pad. And I said, I'm going to do a what? And she says, you're going to do a launch pad. And I'm like, I don't think so. I mean, I kicked and screamed and fought for 5 years in Hawaii not to do this. But fortunately, I had 2 weeks until the go live date. So we did a launch pad. This launch pad has changed my entire perception on how to acutely assess and get a stroke patient treated. There's good emphasis on door to CT. I am not here to downplay door to CT. Door to CT is extremely important. Our focus is door to needle. Because if your door to needle is good, you have to have your CT before you do the needle. So we don't focus on door to CT, we focus on door to needle. So what we do is we intentionally make it slightly uncomfortable, and we do it out in a hallway, and we barricade off the hallway. We have our gurney there that's a weighted gurney, and I encourage every program around, make sure you have a gurney that can take weights. Make sure the gurney is zero before you put the patient on it, and check it to make sure the batteries don't need to be changed before the patient arrives. We have a transport monitor, we have a computer, we have gloves, and we have our teleneurology cart there. We spend 5 minutes at that launch pad, whether they come in by the front door, they go there in a wheelchair, or come in by EMS, working with Chief Lewis. I don't know if he's still here or not. I've spent a lot of time with AFD and working with Chief Lewis. to educate his medics, because it's a change, and it was a change for me, and I knew it was going to be a change for them, and it's going to be difficult. So what we do, the patient goes directly there. We get a blood glucose. We make sure they've got an IV in. We draw their labs. We've paged out teleneurology. Teleneurology comes on with the ED physician and the ED nursing team there, and they assess the patient. Patients that are in that 4.5 hour lytic window that are either BFAST positive, BFAST and VAN positive. During the stroke workup, if you're going to call a code stroke, we're going to put you there. If you're in that lytic window and you don't have contraindications to T and K, we're going to consent you to T and K at that pad before we go to CT. And we do that to save time. So we'll consent you to T and K. We do a verbal consent. And then at the 5-minute mark, we tell neurology, time's up, we're gone. And we go around the corner down the hallway to CT. The patient's consented, we go to CT, we have our labetalol, our nicardipine, and our TNK in the Pyxis in the CT control room. Gus is our imaging director, leaves here. They make sure that it is always there. We have a poster there where we verify weight and dose. Once we get to CT, we'll do a non-con head. Once that non-con head is done, we pause. And we pause to get that wet read. And if the wet read is no bleed and they're consented for lytics, the ER doc is there with us. He says, go. We draw up the lytic, the TNK. We have 2 or 3 nurses and verify with the physician. And we slam the TNK on the CT table. And then we go in and do the CT angio, CT perfusion. It has brought our time down drastically, where we're consistently in the teens to low 20s on a daily basis. And it doesn't matter if it's day shift, night shift, weekday, or weekend. The other thing is once we push lytics and do the CT angio or perfusion, if they screen out VAN positive, we've already notified, pre-alerted Dr. Sokolowski or Dr. He. We've let the cath lab know, and we leave CT and go straight to the cath lab. And there's been a couple times recently where we physically pushed the lytic with the patient on the cath lab table as they're setting up. This is a game changer. It's hard, it's difficult to convey, and it takes methodical work and just making sure that all the nursing staff, all the physician staff are aware. Asking an ER physician to come out of the locked area and go into a hallway can be a challenge, but when they see the outcomes, they're always there, and it works. So just wanted to share that process with you. I'm not saying it works in your facility. I can tell you, I fought it kicking and screaming, and Jennifer, it works. And I know it works. I know it works because division doesn't know I exist anymore. And when your numbers aren't good, division knows I exist. And so them being off of their radar is where I want to live.
I just want to point out, and this is a little bit of a pivot, this slide from what Kevin was talking about, but we're not sharing trade secrets out here. We are sharing our lived experiences from all these different hospitals so that we can make better care for everyone. And that is the most incredible part about this. When you looked at the case feedback forms, it's not really a coincidence that Matt Sue's and A&MC's and the ones that I send out all look a little bit similar. It's because we're building on the work that each other is doing to improve care across the board. And then this slide ties into what Amber was saying. You can't treat what you don't know. You can't fix a problem if you don't have data to prove that there is an issue at hand. And so this is just some of the data that we've been able to collect. And this is just transfers in to hospitals. So you can see in 2020, 126 strokes came to Anchorage for some sort of treatment, whether it was higher level of care, TNK, thrombectomy, and that number steadily climbed. In 2023, it's 243. In 2024, this is probably about the half-year mark of data, and so we're going to see probably an even higher number of strokes that came into Anchorage. And like Kevin said, it's not because the state of Alaska has the healthiest people in the world. It's because we've been grossly under-capturing the burden of stroke in our state and the amount of good that we can do by treating it. And so, and you can see there is color coding because those are the different hospitals. And you can see like we're not redistributing. They're not going to my hospital or to Kevin's hospital differently. We're just capturing and helping more people. And again, like I'm the hippie up here and I'm like, oh, I'm so inspired. But like this makes me inspired that we're gonna make a difference. And so I am super tickled that you're all here to share that.
So stroke centers are data-driven programs, and I don't want to beat a dead horse because I know that Dr. He and Dr. Trimble has already talked about the geographical challenges of Alaska. But data brings awareness, and it really for our organization, it really helps us recognize where we get our transfers in, and this one is transfers in all stroke types. And once we know where our strokes are coming from, like what do we do about it? And so it's one of the Stroke Coalition other pillars we can share. We look at education and how we could reach out to those communities, and Alaska Native Medical Center is really great about, how we work with our tribal health organizations and we share information. We're on the same, some of them are on the same Cerner platform. So as we optimize our workflows, we change our Cerners like in the NIH or in our dysphagia screening, we have those tools. Definitely willing to share those and give that information to our tribal health organizations so they can do better also. So just having that data awareness and seeing where our patients come from really kind of helps us strengthen our muscles and shore up those loose ends.
So the RapidAI story summary, we were talking about what our goals are. And once again, like I don't want to beat a dead horse because we've all kind of talked about it, but we want to streamline the process in any way. We want to remove any barriers that can be identified. And part of that, again, is that partnership with people across the state. It's actually talking to people. I can talk to people from my comfortable love seat in Anchorage and ask them how it's going up in Barrow. And I can make a lot of assumptions to be like, this is your problem. But until they tell me what the problem is, we can't really start to address it. So we're part of this partnership with Rapid. Again, all of this outreach has allowed us, we streamline this transfer process with the referring hospitals. We are creating feedback loops with these referring hospitals. This is how your patient came to us. This is how long it took us to get here. We're working with our transport companies about this issue. This is how your patient turned out in the end. We make sure that all the imaging goes back so that when they seek further care in the place that they're coming from, that they can actually look at all of the scans that they had across the course of their hospitalization. And then to the referring hospitals, like we're trying to cut down time. We're working on the communication. Like it's silly, like we've had the whole breakdown of the RapidAI app, but honestly, the chat feature is amazing. Like you've got an ER doc in who knows where who's like, hey, Lucy, what do you think about this? And she's like, get on the plane. And here they come. So we have RapidAI in the state of Alaska. It's currently active in 10 sites, 6 of which have been generously funded by the grant from the Family Foundation. And the note moving forward, as we spoke about before, there's this non-contrast LVO module that's coming out, and I think that that's going to be another big game changer for the state of Alaska if we can roll that out to places that don't have the ability to do contrast scans and with a reasonable degree of certainty with a little bit of clinical correlation. If we can say, you need to send that patient to Anchorage, and I think that there's something that we can do, that's a huge difference in people's lives.
Yeah,
is it your turn?
And I want to, no, you keep talking. I'm good with that. But I just want to say this non-con LVO is a game changer. And why do I believe it's a game changer? Because patients don't come in with a neon sign saying I'm having a stroke. Patients come in with all kinds of complaints. Being in trauma and stroke world, two things are going to give you a bleed in your head. It's a stroke or a trauma. You don't know. We've had some recent patients that came in as a trauma activation that quickly upon the assessment was like, hang on, this looks more neuro. And we've worked them up as a stroke, and they've had clots, and we've given lytics to. The patients that come in, that's like, and I think I'm guilty. I hope I'm not the only one guilty, but I'm not going to ask anyone else if they feel guilty. But it's like, it's probably drugs. They're altered a little bit. They're kind of in an age group where they look like maybe drugs on board. And you find out that, it's the 27-year-old that has an LVO, and that's why they're acting the way they're acting. They're not acting the way because they're under the influence. They're acting that way because they're having a serious stroke. And those altered mental status, where, you kind of, in the ED world, you just kind of do that obligatory CT head without, because, if you don't do it, somebody's going to critique you and say, why didn't you do it? So you just do it. But we're not picking up these clots right now by doing this without this technology. The 6 sites that were gifted Rapid, I'm going to beg you right now, let us turn it on for you. It's included in your package. All you have to do is say yes, and you've got it. So that way, whether you're going in a stroke protocol and doing the angioperfusion, or if you're just kind of doing that, let's clear the head, make sure there's not a bleed, and that way we can say you're under the influence. It's there, it's ready to be turned on. And our partners with Rapid, they can do it almost simultaneously. It's paid for, it's there. We just want you to turn it on.
And as Kevin said, and Dr. Albers talked about earlier, that even a trained stroke neurologist can sometimes be caught in this. Is this a stroke or is this something else? And so we want to cast a wide net, but if we can do that with AI running in the background to help cast that net a little bit wider, how much good can we do for our patients without actually impacting the workflow and the resources that we're utilizing in our ER and in our scanners? And so what does the future hold? And so within the Stroke Coalition, we are working to expand the utilization of the Rapid Communications platform. I know Cindy has spoken volumes about the utilization of this within her institution, and so this is something that I will very aggressively be pursuing within my institution at the close of this dinner. We are working on statewide transfer workflows, and this is definitely a dynamic conversation with a lot of nuances within it. But as Kelly said earlier, I think these are all problems that we can solve and at least create guidelines. And so it doesn't work in every situation, but at least we have a framework to move things forward. We are also collaborating with our rehab partners across the state, so that way we're making sure that we're impacting all of those different pillars of stroke care, as well as partnering with the Department of Health and a lot of the initiatives that they are doing already within the cardiovascular prevention, disease prevention space. I'm going to give the updates from my hospital before I turn it over to my counterparts. And so at Matsu, like I had just talked about, it's very exciting that we've updated our workflow to include a no-delay CT approach. I know that our EMS partners have been happy that we finally have gotten the buy-in to make this move. And we've done a lot of work with them on looking at the accuracy of EMS calls and making sure that EMS is giving us the information we need to move, et cetera. We've expanded our utilization of CT perfusion, as I was discussing earlier, which is also a very exciting piece for my hospital. And we've recently created a stroke survivor support group, so that way we can make sure that we're helping our community members out after their stroke as they learn to process and work through all of those different challenges that they may or may not have.
What are we doing at Providence? We had this bake sale. My boss is over there, so she thinks it's hilarious. We're going to move our CT scanner because I was able to bring forth a lot of really compelling data about why we should and why it was a cost-effective move. Currently, unfortunately, it's about the length of a football field away from our emergency room, and it turns out it's harder than you'd think, but we're going to pick it up and move it down the hall and put it in our emergency room so that we have much faster time to diagnosis. And also, as Providence is home to the Women and Children's Hospital, we've actually found that there's a substantial, well, not substantial, but worth noticing population in the women and children's population that are also experiencing strokes in a way then honestly, like as an adult ICU nurse, I never really thought was a thing. You know, I know a bunch of ER nurses and ICU nurses in here, and we're like, ooh, laboring women. But the stroke risk in that population is real, and the stroke risk in our young people is actually very real. And so we are partnering with our pediatric neurologists and our Women and Children's Hospital to start to develop protocols to treat those strokes as well. And I think that there's been a lot of exciting collaboration there, and I'm looking forward to the future on that front.
Like I said, for ANMC, we're starting on our journey to primary stroke centers, but we've made a lot of progress. We've really focused on our hyperacute strokes in the emergency department and made a lot of progress there. We're going to optimize our workflows. We also have a ED expansion program, so ED expansion that we're going to push out our building out and then up 5 floors. And so when we're doing that, really try and keep in mind and be cognizant of what our opportunities for stroke care is in there as we build, so we don't have to regret it later. We turned our attention to inpatient strokes and stroke awareness, so recognizing neurological deficits on the floor, even though it doesn't happen very often. And of course, we're really working on nursing education. So, yeah.
All right, and at Alaska Regional, kudos to Lee and Gus for working on some quotes to work on a process to upgrade our CT as well. And when Dr. He is your medical director, and when Dr. He says to you with a very stern face, Kevin, the worst place in the world to have a stroke is when you're in the hospital, you focus on the inpatient side. We have completely revamped our inpatient stroke alert. And I think it works. I know I've got some ICU colleagues here, and they like have records now on how quick they can page them out. But we've mirrored it after our ED process, and it works. It's thinking outside the box again. Our 2 most recent strokes that were inpatient stroke alerts, one inpatient had TNK pushed at 19 minutes from stroke alert activation and was given in CT. The other patient was in the cath lab in 30 minutes and TNK in 31 minutes, and those were inpatients that were noticed immediately by the inpatient nursing staff, and we did an activation on. And I want Dr. He to tell me that in the hospital is not the worst place to have a stroke.
So absolutely, as Kevin said, kind of taking those lessons that we learned from the ER and applying them throughout each of our hospitals in the inpatient settings, and then taking lessons learned from our experiences in South Central and applying them out throughout the state and seeing how we can help one another just to take care of stroke patients all across the state. I want to say thank you to all of you who are here. Thank you to Rapid for hosting such a wonderful event and for dedicating your time and partnership with us. And we hope this was helpful for all of you, and we are definitely open for questions.
This question is for Nick, Amber, and is it Kelly? When you guys call the code stroke or whatever you call it internally, who is obligated? What physicians are obligated to show up?
So I can start, and then we probably all have different processes. I can say at Alaska Regional, when we call an inpatient stroke, if it's out of ICU, the med-surg nurse will call a rapid response initially. ICU, the ICU charge nurse responds along with the house supervisor. They'll do a quick assessment. They'll activate the stroke alert. The reason we call a rapid response initially is because we have a hospitalist that is assigned to all rapid responses and reports to a rapid response just like a code. So at that point, we have our hospitalist, if it's outside of ICU, our intensivist, if it's inside of ICU, our ICU charge nurse, house supervisor, and then what we do on the inpatient stroke alert is mirror it, where we page out our Blue Sky teleneurology partners to a phone call, and the neurologist is on the phone with the hospitalist that's at bedside, and they go over the stuff, because inpatient strokes, oftentimes they're on Lovenox. Are they on VTE prophylaxis, or are they on weight-based? Are they on any NOACs? Are they, what are they in the hospital for? What are you expecting course of stay? And we do that to connect neurology with the hospitalist or the intensivist while the patient's still in the room, so that when we go to CT, we have a very clear expectation on what we're going to do, so that we don't get stuck in CT with nursing staff and then trying to get a hold of our physician partners. And that's how we're able to turn it around and to be able to get those lytics ordered and in. So that's who responds at my location.
Yeah, and so our inpatient stroke alert process is fairly similar. In our hospital, typically our nurses are calling a rapid response hospitalist as part of that team. It includes the ICU and the med-surg charge nurse, along with respiratory, and the house supervisor is our rapid response team. When a stroke alert's called, that includes the ER and pharmacy as well. We also page telestroke so they can have a verbal conversation while the patient's going to CT, and then when they come back, the neurologist beams in to actually assess our patients. That's how it works within our institution. A lot of the work that we've done at our hospital is not being scared to activate inpatient stroke alerts. And so a ton of work has gone into just tracking how many are we calling? Because we went from calling like maybe 1 or 2 a year, and those were only when we were actually going to give lytics, and our times were abysmal, like 90 to 120 minutes to give lytics from the time that we first noticed symptoms, which echoes the sentiment that it's the worst place to have a stroke. I'm happy to say that our times are sub 60 minutes consistently now on our inpatient strokes, and the number that we've called has increased significantly. And so that's kind of the place to start, I think, if you're trying to improve that within an institution.
At Providence, we're really fortunate to have a team of nurses that have been trained especially to respond to rapid response. So we call them our SSS team. It's our stroke, STEMI, and sepsis nurses. And they go into those situations armed with a raft of nurse-initiated orders, which do include the CAT scan. In the inpatient alert part, we always try to contact the primary provider because, of course, they are the most knowledgeable about that patient. But we all work in hospitals, and we know that that person is not always immediately available. So we have partnered with our emergency room physicians, who we know are always on site. And they are basically our redundancy plan if we can't come into contact with the primary provider at that time. The stroke STEMI sepsis nurses are also the lead wranglers for our telestroke process, and so they know where all the carts are. They know how to get in contact with those telestroke providers, and so they are simultaneously arranging to get the patient downstairs, to get the bay and the PACU set up to receive that patient where the telestroke cart is waiting for them, and to wrangle whichever physician needs to be brought into that mix at that time.
Follow up, if the patient is in the emergency department, do you call a stroke alert?
Yes.
So I think in each of our facilities, we've implemented a kind of tiered stroke alert. So level 1, level 2, based off of time of last known well and likelihood of potential intervention. And so that also helps to allocate your resources. And so like in my institution, a level 1 stroke includes getting you pharmacy, whereas a level 2 doesn't necessarily. It also has some implications on whether the nurse needs to go with the patient to CT or not, to help a little bit with the throughput in the ER while we still move our times quickly. But we're recognizing that your patient with an NIH of 1 who's 18 hours out from their stroke absolutely still is a stroke alert, but your likelihood of intervention is very low, and you don't necessarily need that nurse to go with that patient. They're probably safe with the transport team.
And I think I left off at the hospitalist or intensivist talking with the neurologist. We do then go to CAT scan, and we have a dedicated teleneurology cart in CT. So once we do the exam in CT, we then have our teleneurology examine the patient in CT. We already have a yes or no for lytics at that point, but we do that intentional exam by neurology in CT to give time for rapid to process and the radiologist to take a look at it, because there's oftentimes we're going to come out of CT and go direct to cath lab and not go back up to the floor.
Your teleneuro, how quickly do they respond on a typical basis? And are they contractually obligated to respond within a certain amount of time, and are they consistent? Yes.
They have 3 minutes. If they don't respond in 3 minutes, we repage. If they don't call us within 5 minutes from the first page, we have their cell phone numbers and we call them.
And do you get stroke vascular neurologists with your teleneuro?
We get a variety. We use blue sky neurology, so there's different. The neurologists have different focus, but they're all credentialed for telestroke and acute stroke intervention. As far as the lytics and
They have RapidAI.
they do. They have RapidAI. As a matter of fact, I will say earlier this week with Dr. He, we were doing an ED stroke alert, and it was one that looked like an LVO. It was hemiparesis and aphasia and gaze and threat. We had pre-alerted Dr. He that it looks like we've got a stroke coming. Looks like this looks real. We pre-alerted cath lab. We went from the launch pad to CT. Our neurologist, I think this one is in Denver. He actually used the chat function in Rapid to say it looks like what a dense MCA, and communicated on the non-con head. And then we used the chat function within Rapid to communicate. Dr. He and I and Mike and the team were communicating back and forth. We got it's a go across the app in Rapid, and that's the way we communicate.
All 4 hospitals up here all have different telestroke services, but we all have very similar standards when it comes to response time and expectations. So it's, I don't know how to say it, like less PC, but like it's a service you buy, you set the standards, right?
So under 5 minutes, submitting a call to them to having a physician on the line available to speak to a physician.
Correct.
Okay, have you guys considered doing earlier activation for the call team, for the cath lab staff? I know one of the bigger issues is, transportation, like everything in this presentation. Like if I live in Eagle River, for example, you page me in, I have 30 minutes to get there. It would be nicer if I could get there a little bit early, because it's gonna take me like 20-ish minutes in the winter, maybe pushing 30 minutes to actually get there. And I feel like the biggest holdup on my end, holding up your numbers to being great, to being fantastic, is just like 15 more minutes even, just to get everything set up so I can pull, like as soon as they're out of the CT and we're ready to go, we can be like, we're set up, we're ready, can we bring them in here? We don't have to go get them, just bring them in.
Yeah, no, so in the case that we were just talking about, from the launchpad side, this patient screened band positive. Screening band positive, Mike or I go from the launchpad to cath lab and give them a heads up. We were fortunate, they were prepping and setting up for another case. They held that case, and yes, the more time that we can give cath lab before we have diagnosis to get them on the way in is the way to go, because once we're in CT and get the positive, then we're coming over.
I guess mine was more for like on-call services, because I know that's a bigger issue in the state right now, is there's only a few, it's like a small number of cath lab teams at both hospitals. So during the day, I'm not really worried about it because we have people there, but during the nights and the weekends, I think is what I'm trying to say is like, is there a way to get it so we can get there a little bit earlier? I don't know, it's like a hospital issue.
No, I think what you're talking about, Joey, is not just like the patients that we know are transferring from the outside, right? You're talking about like EMS activation in the field. I think that it's a really good question, because if you actually look at it, the longest door to cath lab or door to groin times are with the patients that present directly to the ER, and it's because you guys get no forewarning, right? We don't know that this patient necessarily has an LVO. We know that they're maybe coming in for a stroke, or who knows, maybe they got coded as a seizure or something like that. The reason why the outside transferring patients, we have such short door to groin times, is because you guys get called in an hour earlier to physically get set up. That's our protocol now. And then we get anesthesia ready and everything else. And I think part of the question also is that, are we going to overutilize you guys if we start, calling you guys in for every van positive in the field? And the answer, honestly, is that I don't know. Okay, the reality of it is that we probably need to work with our local EMS and AFD partners, at least locally, and start looking at, Dr. Levy has those guys trained in Vans Plus and whatnot. Let's look at, who they're flagging as Vans Plus. What does that correlate to into the number of patients who are LVO or MEVO positive? And then the last step is, what is then the percentage of those that are, large or medium vessel occlusion positive that wind up getting intervention, right? Because until we have that data, it's really hard to say. And maybe in some of it, we can look at and say, hey, like if you are of this age group and X, Y, and Z things, then this is highly likely. And if that's the case, then let's call you guys in early. I think one of the other things that's possible too is that if we were to use some other form of communication in terms of either overall communication, or some people call it like pre-hospital screening, there's time that it takes for the patient to go to get the CT and come back. Maybe if we're all on that same platform and it's like, hey, teleneurology has seen that patient, this stroke scale is like a 10, right? So maybe we start having you guys come in, early, and then we can wave you off, but part of that also is your guys' willingness and buy-in to do that and know that you might get all the way here and then have to go back home, or vice versa. But I think that if we could more reliably predict or present data that indicates like how likely in certain scenarios it is or how accurate we are in diagnosing it, I think it goes a long way. And then, maybe an intermediate step is utilizing something like a shared within whatever hospital system notification system. So, hey, teleneurology saw the patient, the stroke scale is 20, start heading in, and if it turns out it's hemorrhagic, then great, then, you guys get waved off, but you would get notified of that in a more direct way. Because right now, I agree, the process is I call the nursing supervisor, and then I have to call and ask who's on call. Then I have to go find a text message chain to send you guys text messages. And this is the same at both hospitals. It's not efficient. It's not centralized. And it requires a lot of manual labor right now. And so a situation that would make sense is that there's some entity in place where you guys select if you're on call, not on call, and then a single text through a centralized location then goes out and says, come in, don't come in. At other places like where Jen and I trained, usually there's a paging system. And so if there's a level 1 stroke alert, that's going in, you get that page out and people start heading in, whatnot. Or they'll get one that says, stroke scale of like 17, whatever. And so you sort of have a piqued interest. But yeah, I agree. I think that there are still better ways because the door to groin times for direct, patients to the ER along with inpatient stroke alerts are the worst. And it's for specific reasons because we don't have forewarning. So.
Hey, I'm Jeffrey Roger from Samuel Simmons up in Barrow.
Yay! Keep that on Zoom.
Thank you. Amber, I saw on the bottom of one of your slides communication about bypassing getting physician approval before you notify LifeMed. And it was just, I caught it briefly. So for us, we're about as far away from you as anyone could be. And whether this, that, the other thing, we have our own medevac with North Slope Borough, but frequently one of our 3 assets is not in service. And so we rely on Guardian and we rely on LifeMed. And they've been amazing. And sometimes there's a dead horse crew out of Prudhoe that can come and then take them down. Sometimes they've got to come all the way up from Anchorage. So the question I have for anybody here who might be with LifeMed or with Guardian, and for the Stroke Coalition in general, is there any rule or parameter that we can follow that I can tell the rest of my team, look, when you have an LVO or we call it MEVO that you want to send down, let's just get going, get the transport, because that's our rate limiting step. Is that legit, or have we worked that out in any way? Because usually it's like, well, who's your accepting physician and what facility? And I'm like, I just can't tell you, but this is an emergency. Please activate.
So I'll tell you what we've done at our hospital, and I think some of the transport companies here can probably respond, and I'll give you a little tidbit into some of what Dr. He has said. And so at my hospital, I frequently reconfirm with LifeMed that they will come stand by at my facility to critically transport select cases before we have an accepting physician, knowing that it's going to take them about 20 minutes to land on our helipad, and in that period of time, we will have an accepting. And so that's how that works at my hospital. And so it's an agreement. We have LifeMed that's out of Wolf Lake, and so it's a smaller territory to look at. What Dr. He had talked about a little bit earlier is if you have a patient with a high stroke scale and you're already putting them through your scanner with Rapid, giving the interventionalist a heads up saying, hey, can you take a look at this? That would probably bypass that official, yes, this is an LVO, and then waiting to get an accepting to get to a facility, and you could kind of be running all those processes in parallel. And so those are just kind of my 2 thoughts on that. I don't know if that's helpful. And then if there's any transport companies who would like to respond, and it looks like Dr. Trimble has some input on this one as well. LifeMed? Okay.
Awesome.
My name is Travis Cruz. I'm VP of Clinical Operations and Education at LifeMed. Yeah, I'm really excited to meet all of y'all in person. Haven't got your name. I actually just earlier got to talk with Dr. He briefly about this exact thing. The reality is we all know there's legal loopholes and there's legal hoops and all this kind of stuff, but realistically, Our goal is all the same. Let's get people to the hospital that they need to be at as quickly as possible. I would really like to work with y'all to see if we can, at least with Dr. He and potentially even a statewide standard, create a situation where, whether it's a 2-tiered system where there's like a stroke alert that puts our crews on standby. So at a minimum, we're at the plane with the door ready to close and go. And that's maybe like, we don't know if we're gonna transfer, but we think there's a good chance, versus the RapidAI is saying, or the doctors are saying this is legit, we're literally just shopping for a doctor. At which point, guys, like, just call us. We'll close the door and head your way. We know that there's literally only 2 places we're gonna end up, right? It's not a big deal. As far as getting that through our dispatch, we may need to improve our process to better serve y'all. And I very much want to engage with y'all to have that conversation to figure out how to best do that. I do not want people having extended transport times because we're waiting for an accepting physician. That seems really silly.
I have a question.
I just want to respond to that, Dr. Trimble. Thank you for that amazing perspective on caring for the community. That's awesome.
You're very welcome.
I have a question. What have you done with the patient in Barrow when you're ready to make this decision?
Do you mean in terms of diagnostic workup or treatment?
Yes. What have you done with the patient when you're making this decision to transfer?
Well, since becoming part of the ASC now, we have a straight to CT protocol. So someone comes in, suspicion for stroke, they don't stop in the ED, they get a glucose check and off they go, traditional stroke protocol. And they come back, we're looking at the images quickly on our PACS. RapidAI is just now activating, so we'll have it on our telephones in the ED. And then if it's going to be a lytic indication, because it's a long delay, we would certainly talk with neurosurgeons first. So it's conceivable that they could get lytics, but certainly they would have a CT. It wouldn't just be based on clinical suspicion and a bedside NIH stroke scale score.
You have the ability to do a CT angiogram.
Yes, sir. We have a 64-slice scanner. We
Right.
do CT, CTA, and CTP.
So I would advocate that you do your CT scan, and if they're a candidate for lytics, you give the lytics and then decide where you're going to go. If you have somebody with a large vessel occlusion, yes, you need to make arrangements to get down to the Comprehensive Stroke Center as soon as possible.
Thank you.
But you need to evaluate the patient first. And it would be great if your RapidAI was up and running so we could see the images and communicate with you better.
Noted.
And I think if I could follow up too for Dr. He and Dr. Sokolowski, if they're lytic eligible and lytic capable, you're gonna give lytics, and we give lytics to go straight to a cath lab.
Great. Got it. Thanks. Perfect.
One of the things that sometimes gets lost also is that
A lot of the hospitals that are lytic capable and have CT, and rapid and whatnot, are not necessarily ones that then can do the 24-hour post-op ICU care. And so I think that's a distinction that needs to be made as well. And I'm guessing, do you guys hold on to your post-lytic patients if it's just embolic, or do they all have to go?
No, they all go. That's a challenge.
Yeah.
We
Gotcha.
patient beds in the hospitals who sometimes they are very comfortable caring for sicker patients and so on, but some not. And so it's really a case of kind of the concern that I have, and I've heard so clearly the idea that we can save money by not transporting patients who don't need an intervention. But it's the post-stroke care. We can't do a cath lab, and all that type of stuff. So the rehabilitation and the OT, PT we have, but we don't have the services. Yeah.
So it sounds like in a situation like this, and overly simplifying it, but if you have a patient that has clear high neurologic deficits, no matter what, it's highly likely that they're going to wind up transferring down. And so, I think that, and again, this sort of highlights like how different every hospital situation is. If some places like Fairbanks, they can give lytics, they have an ICU, they can hold on to the embolic patients that, aren't otherwise intervention candidates and whatnot. And we have hospitals like yours that, have imaging and have lytic capability, but these patients, no matter what, need to go someplace else afterwards. And so I think you're asking a very reasonable question, which is that if you are at a hospital like this and we know that the patient needs to transfer, then what are our barriers to activating, transportation? And the question becomes, do we necessarily have to follow our current protocol, which is that you have to have an accepting physician, you have to have a location, and X, Y, and Z things. And I think that some of this stuff has to be, at least sorted out ahead of time. But at least from a stroke intervention standpoint, it can probably be finalized, after they get there, or many times this happens too. Like, we're planning on accepting it to one facility, and then we get called, hey, sorry, a STEMI rolled in, your cath lab's encumbered now, and so we have to make a change. But I think in many ways, because now the issue isn't who's covering, which facility for stroke. That's been standardized. That's the same. The only question is that facility available to do the intervention? And so, at least from a stroke intervention standpoint, I think that should be less of a barrier. And so I think that having the ability to say, yes, this patient's been accepted, they're an intervention candidate, we can figure out exactly where on the back end.
I suppose one other issue that's unique to our situation, sorry, Dr. Trimble, is, and again, I don't know if this is an ASC issue that is appropriate to bring up here, if we should talk about it in a meeting, but getting approval for our beneficiaries, because they can go to Alaska Native Medical Center, but they can't necessarily go to Prov until Alaska Native gives the blessing that they can go to Prov. So if they're a lytic candidate or a thrombolytic candidate, they would, I'm sorry, did I say thrombolytic? I mean, an intervention candidate by Dr. He. It'd be really nice to have a system that sort of is greased, so we don't have to make multiple phone calls to get the approval from A&MC and then go on to Providence. I would
It's
love to
not
see
that complicated.
Oh, help us with that then, please.
Okay. If it's a lytic patient that you have, if it's any kind of stroke patient, they're not a candidate for acute treatment, we will take them at A&MC.
I'm sorry, I meant thrombectomy. I didn't mean lytic. Lytic, of course, but the ones that are going to go to Prov or to
Okay, so some patients are going to have a large vessel occlusion, but the lytic patients do need ICU care after being treated, and we're happy to take those, and we always are open to take those, unless our ICU is closed, and then we have to divert to another ICU. But the standard of care is they go to an ICU after lytic therapy. But you have the ability to do a CT angiogram and diagnose a large vessel occlusion. And there you get them down to Dr. He's hospital as soon as possible. So you have those there's three people who show up much too late to get any acute treatment. They need a stroke workup, and we're happy to take them, and we can do the stroke workup, we can do the rehab. We do a very good job with that. If they do qualify for lytic treatment and they don't have a large vessel occlusion, we're still happy to take those patients and work them up and do the ICU piece and get them rehabilitated. But if it's in the case of a large vessel occlusion, we're happy to bypass AMC and they go right to the Comprehensive Stroke Center.
Sure, I appreciate the explanation. I think I get that. The technical part is that if I send a beneficiary straight to Prov without a blessing from A&MC, then the economics of this are burdensome to the patient. So I need to have something.
We are happy to okay a large vessel occlusion within the window to treat, to go outside the tribal health system and get treated.
So as simple as one call to the transfer center, I tell them I've got an LVO and
it's easy.
Done. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, I want us to thank again our panelists for an amazing job. So to me, it's become very clear since we arrived here that Alaska naturally selects people who are mission-driven, resourceful, and community-oriented. RapidAI is honored to partner with the Alaska Stroke Coalition on this initiative, and we hope that you will all reach out, not only to your colleagues here, but to us. We have a support system, customer service, that is available 24/7, 365 days a year. We have an amazing clinical success team. We have one of our representatives here in the room. Many of you know her already, Summer Coffee. So if you're looking for education, if you're looking to help with your workflow, if you have just questions, not only from your colleagues, but about the software and how others may have used it in situations like yours at your institution, please call, email us. We're here to help. That's the whole point of this partnership. Again, very proud to work with all of you, to have gotten to know you, and really look forward to making great strides to ensure that we have excellent care for all Alaskans. Thank you so much for spending your Friday night with us. Have a safe trip home and a great weekend.